Hello my little subscribers, it's time for another video. Anyway, I've noticed that SpongeBob theories are really popular lately, and this isn't just because it's popular, but I love SpongeBob. I grew up on the show, and SpongeBob is a great TV show. Even today, I still like it. But there's always been a lot of theories, and I have my own, but I wanted to focus on one that I don't think very many people talk about. Mr. Krabs is often ignored in the theory world. He's often just kind of sidetracked. There are a few, like, sometimes involving Pearl and Plankton, but usually he's ignored, and that kind of makes sense. A lot of them have more interesting stuff going on, but I want to give one to Mr. Krabs here. And one that isn't, I think, as outlandish as some claim. Now, honestly, I like the outlandish theories, the fun, but they often suffer from, well, flimsy evidence. But this one, I think, has some pretty good evidence for it being true. I'm going to call it the Mr. Krabs was a war hero. Now, this goes on. Now, granted, canon SpongeBob is iffy, but some consistent elements about Mr. Krabs are that he was at some point in the Navy / was a pirate. The exact order of when these events occurred are somewhat unclear, but given the fact that his Navy buddies seem to look at it isn't viewed as a criminal, or at least not a criminal for pirating, I'm going to say that he was probably a pirate first and then joined the Navy. Or at least was maybe a privateer for the Bikini Bottom. Or on some way he was on good terms with Bikini Bottom, who isn't a criminal for fighting against them in a war. And that's another thing. In one episode, as we all know, but I think it's also hinted at a few times, Mr. Krabs served in some kind of war. The exact nature which of who he was fighting, how long he was fighting is very unknown. But given the fact his naval buddies have a lot of scars, I'm willing to say he's been fighting for a while. Or at least it was a pretty brutal fight, whoever he was fighting. And one of the things about Bikini Bottom is, despite the fact we see a lot of older gentlemen, that kind of thing, we don't see a lot of veterans. Now, obviously, it's hard to tell because it's not exactly all veterans wear a tag saying, I am a veteran. But generally speaking, we don't see a lot of fish who seem to be veterans, or at least act like they were mentioned serving in the Army. Mr. Krabs is one of the exceptions. He is well known that he served in the Navy for some point. Although I don't know exactly you can have an army under the sea without being considered the Navy, or at least the Marines, but whatever. On occasion it makes up the Army and military. That's because I occasionally make the names wrong by stupidity. But think about it. He is well known that he served in the Army, or the Navy. He did a lot of, and he must have went on a lot of adventures just because, it's crazy. And we don't see a lot of veterans. And that leads me to think that whatever war Mr. Krabs fought in, or battles or skirmishes he got involved in, were extremely deadly, and therefore did not leave a lot of veterans behind. There was not a lot of people left to tell those stories, which means that Mr. Krabs must have been some serious grade A boss to be able to still be alive, when seemingly everyone else didn't, or at least a lot didn't. And this is compounded by the fact that think about all the crazy stuff that happens in Bikini Bottom. All the crazy, deadly, destructive things that happen on a pseudo-regular basis. Now even we assume that these wild, crazy monsters or events that happen in Bikini Bottom are kind of like the serial killers of our world. Relatively rare, but destructive. But no one in the right mind would say a serial killer is anywhere near as destructive or deadly as fighting in World War I, II, or really any war. So, if this is what Bikini Bottom and the overall SpongeBob world looks like in a state of peace, then what does it look like in a state of war? Like, think about it. What exactly does that world look like when things go to war for long-term periods of time? We just don't know. Maybe because none of the cast is really around then. Mr. Krabs is pretty much, obviously, one of the oldest characters. I say the only one who could be around his age is likely Mrs. Puff, but even then, that's only a few characters. SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squid might have been a baby, and maybe Sandy too, but no, they wouldn't have really known what was going on. And that's quite possible that that's part of the reason why it's never brought up in the show much, is that it's not really in collective memory much. But I have another reason to someone say, well, but I'm making a claim that Mr. Krabs is not just a veteran like we know, but he is a war hero. He has done great things and slayed many a beast to save Bikini Bottom. But my question is, I bet someone will reasonably ask, well, why isn't he viewed as such? Why isn't he thought of as this great war hero who saved Bikini Bottom many times? Well, I have two theories. One, Bikini Bottom doesn't have the same military culture that America does. Now, I don't think I have to explain that not every country thinks like America. And America is relatively well known for having a great respect for its veterans. the army is well regarded. It's put in high priority. America isn't really aggressive, or it's not a warrior culture in the same way something like the Klingons are, but it has a martial culture. It respects its past, its military, and respects people who serve in it with great honor. This is why we have veteran benefits and pensions, that kind of thing, because those who serve in the army or the military broadly deserve that kind of recognition. Now, granted, we don't always treat them like we should, as trying to give people that kind of thing is just such a pain, but they really do need to be treated better. But the point still stands: American culture respects the veterans. But it's not the same like that in all parts of the world. And my first thought is that Bikini Bottom does not view the military as important as we do. They simply don't. They view it more as just a thing. We know they have some form of standing army, but it might not be highly regarded. This also may partially explain why we don't see more veterans in the show, as maybe it's just not mentioned much because it doesn't have as much of an impact in their society. But my theory generally relies that, simply put, their society does not view veterancy and the army and fighting as well as ours does. So therefore, Mr. Krabs is not regarded as a war hero because they don't have war heroes in their history as much. The second theory relies more on SpongeBob lore, but I think it could also work. Now, in case you haven't known, SpongeBob occasionally plays with Greek mythology, aka Greek/Roman mythology, aka King Neptune rules the sea as kind of their god. Now, religion in SpongeBob is this weird thing that has, as I've detected it, SpongeBob having SpongeBob had about 4 different religions, at least in Bikini Bottom has about 4 different religions, but the major one is definitely worshipping King Neptune. Now, granted, we don't know exactly if there are other Greek gods in this world. We don't know if Zeus, Hades, or anyone else exists, although we do know a few, King Neptune's wife and his son. And we don't also know a lot of details about it, but we are able to make some guesses. Although, personally, I tend to think the Bikini Bottom residents are close to monotheistic when it comes to King Neptune rather than polytheistic to the Greek pantheon. But that's just a theory for another day. But in Greek mythology, there are often many heroes, great heroes who are related to the gods. What if, in the SpongeBob world, in order to be considered a great war hero or someone of that note to be worth celebrating, you have to be related to King Poseidon or another powerful being? Mr. Krabs, just being a guy, might not get this recognition because he is just a guy. He may have done great, amazing things, slayed many a beast and monster, and survived nearly impossible situations, but simply put, because he was related to King Neptune, it doesn't matter. He's just a guy. I don't know, because it's kind of hard to tell, but that could be a suspicion. Maybe it's a combination of both factors and all these things. But yeah, that's basically my theory, that Mr. Krabs is a war hero, at least in the past of the show, and he has survived many an encounter. And before someone's like, isn't Mr. Krabs not notably that tough? Well, he is tough, just not very good at fighting. But we have to remember, this is Mr. Krabs older. This is his middle age, pushing on his older years. This isn't Mr. Krabs at his prime. Who knows what he might have been able to do. And even in his older age, he's still capable of some pretty impressive feats, even by the show standards. So, you have to remember that he is a lot more impressive than he looks. But yeah, that's generally my theory about the Mr. Krabs being a war. I don't see a lot of theories from Mr. Krabs, and I think this one makes a lot more sense. It isn't just dark for dark's sake, as it adds up with stuff we see in the show. Anyway, that's just my theory on today. Yeah? Hey, why don't you hit that sub button? You're gonna become a subscribble. Get to see my content quicker. Wouldn't that be nice? I bet so.